Paris, 1925. In the heart of the city stood a monument the entire world admired, and one man looked at it and saw an opportunity to sell it. The Eiffel Tower had become the unmistakable symbol of Paris. Millions of visitors traveled across continents to see the Iron Giant rise above the skyline. It represented modern engineering, national pride, and the spirit of France itself. But to one extraordinary con artist, it looked like something very different. It looked like scrap metal. The man behind the most unbelievable fraud in modern history was Victor Lustig, a smooth-talking, multilingual swindler whose schemes stretched across Europe and the United States. Known for his elegance, charm, and almost theatrical confidence, Lustig built a career out of deception so bold that even seasoned criminals struggled to believe his stories. He dressed like an aristocrat, spoke several languages fluently, and carried himself with the calm authority of a diplomat. People trusted him instinctively, and that trust would become his greatest weapon. Lustig was born in 1890 in what is now the Czech Republic, then part of the vast Austro-Hungarian Empire. From an early age, he showed a sharp mind and a restless ambition. Some accounts suggest he studied languages and psychology, skills that later allowed him to read people with remarkable precision. But instead of choosing a respectable path, Lustig drifted into a world of gambling halls, luxury trains, and high society lounges across Europe. It was the perfect environment for a con artist. During the early 20th century, Europe was full of wealthy travelers, businessmen, and aristocrats, moving between cities like Vienna, Berlin, and Paris. The elegant cabins of transatlantic liners and luxury trains created opportunities for men who knew how to manipulate confidence. Lustig became one of the best. One of his early tricks involved what he called the money box. He would demonstrate a mysterious device that supposedly duplicated banknotes. The machine, he claimed, needed several hours to process the bills. In reality, the box was rigged with 2 real notes already hidden inside. Victims would watch as their money disappeared into the machine, and hours later, 2 genuine bills emerged. Convinced the device worked, they would pay enormous sums to buy the machine. By the time they discovered the trick, Lustig was already gone. Schemes like this earned him wealth, but more importantly, they sharpened his understanding of human psychology. Lustig knew that the most powerful lies were the ones people wanted to believe. And in the chaotic years after World War I, Europe was full of uncertainty, ambition, and opportunity. Governments struggled with debt, cities were rebuilding, economies shifted rapidly, and newspapers were filled with stories about public spending and national infrastructure. It was during this moment of political and economic confusion that Lustig encountered an article that would inspire the most audacious idea of his career. In 1925, a small report appeared in a Paris newspaper discussing the maintenance costs of the Eiffel Tower. Built in 1889 for the Exposition Universelle, the tower had originally been intended as a temporary structure. Decades later, the massive iron monument required expensive repairs. For most readers, the article was forgettable. But for Victor Lustig, it was a spark. If the tower was expensive to maintain, perhaps people might believe the government wanted to get rid of it. And if they believed that, perhaps someone could be convinced to buy it. Victor Lustig understood something most criminals did not. The greatest scams are not about force or speed. They are about patience, preparation, and the careful manipulation of belief. By 1925, the towering iron structure rising above Paris had become one of the most recognizable landmarks on Earth. Yet the newspaper article describing the costly maintenance of the Eiffel Tower gave Lustig the seed of an extraordinary idea. If the public believed the tower was expensive to maintain, perhaps they might also believe the government wanted to quietly dismantle it. And if that were true, the metal itself would be incredibly valuable. Lustig immediately began designing the illusion. A successful con depended on two things: authority and secrecy. First, he needed to appear as a representative of the French government. Second, he had to create a situation where his victims would feel privileged to be involved in something confidential. Lustig checked into one of the most luxurious hotels in Paris, the prestigious Hôtel de Crillon, a place often used by diplomats and government officials. From there, he began sending formal invitations to several wealthy scrap metal dealers across France. Each letter appeared official, stamped and written with bureaucratic language. It claimed the sender was a deputy director in the French Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs, a government department that actually existed at the time. The letters invited the recipients to an urgent and confidential meeting. 6 businessmen accepted. They arrived at the hotel expecting to meet a government official involved in a major infrastructure decision. Instead, they found a well-dressed man with polished manners and the calm authority of someone accustomed to power. Victor Lustig played his role perfectly. He explained that the French government faced a delicate problem. The Eiffel Tower, he said, had become extremely expensive to maintain. Publicly announcing plans to dismantle it would cause outrage among citizens who considered the structure a national treasure. Therefore, the government intended to handle the situation quietly. The tower would be sold for scrap. The businessmen were told they had been carefully selected to bid on the contract because of their experience in the metal industry. However, the entire operation had to remain strictly confidential until the decision was finalized. The proposal sounded shocking, but it also sounded plausible. At the time, the Eiffel Tower was only a few decades old, and some Parisians had never fully accepted it as a permanent monument. When it was first built for the Exposition Universelle, many artists and intellectuals had protested its construction. The idea that the government might remove it was not completely impossible. To strengthen the illusion, Lustig arranged for the businessmen to visit the tower itself. During the tour, he spoke confidently about the massive amount of metal contained within the structure, more than 7,000 tons of iron. To a scrap dealer, that number represented enormous profit. As the men looked up at the towering lattice of steel, they began to imagine the fortune it could bring. But Lustig was studying them just as carefully. Every word, every reaction, every hesitation revealed something about their personalities. Some were skeptical, others were cautious. One man, however, stood out. His name was André Poisson. Poisson was relatively new to the scrap metal industry and eager to establish himself among more experienced competitors. Lustig recognized the familiar mixture of ambition and insecurity. The perfect combination for manipulation. So he made his move. Privately, Lustig approached Poisson and suggested something delicate. Government officials, he hinted, were often underpaid. A discreet personal payment could help ensure that Poisson's bid received favorable consideration. In other words, a bribe. Paradoxically, this made the entire scheme seem more authentic. Corruption within bureaucracies was not unusual, and Poisson interpreted Lustig's request as proof that the deal was genuine. After several tense meetings and negotiations, Poisson agreed. He paid Lustig a large sum of money, both for the supposed rights to dismantle the Eiffel Tower and for the secret favor that would guarantee the contract. Within days, Victor Lustig quietly left Paris. Only later did André Poisson realize the truth. He had just paid for the Eiffel Tower, a monument that, of course, was never for sale. Humiliated and afraid of public embarrassment, Poisson chose not to report the crime to the authorities, admitting the deception would expose him as the man who believed he had purchased one of the most famous structures in the world. And for Victor Lustig, that silence created an astonishing opportunity, because if no one reported the crime, there was nothing stopping him from trying the same scam again. Victor Lustig waited patiently outside France, watching the newspapers. Days passed, then weeks. There was no headline exposing the scam, no police investigation, no public scandal. The man who had bought the Eiffel Tower had remained silent. For most criminals, escaping with such a fortune would have been enough. But Lustig was not like most criminals. His greatest weakness, and his greatest talent, was audacity. If the world had not discovered the deception the first time, perhaps it could be done again. So, astonishingly, Lustig returned to Paris and began preparing to repeat the entire operation. Once again, he forged official documents. Once again, he arranged meetings with scrap metal dealers. And once again, he presented himself as a senior government official responsible for the secret sale of the tower. But this time, something was different. One of the new targets grew suspicious. The story, while clever, seemed strange when examined too closely. Instead of remaining silent, the man contacted the authorities. Sensing danger, Lustig disappeared before police could reach him. Within days, he had fled France. The boldest scam of his career had almost been repeated, but Paris was no longer safe for him. Lustig crossed the Atlantic and continued his life of deception in the United States, where his reputation as a master swindler only grew. In New York City and Chicago, he targeted wealthy businessmen, gamblers, and bankers. His confidence tricks evolved constantly, but they all relied on the same principle: authority, charm, and carefully constructed illusion. Among criminals, Lustig gained a legendary reputation for intelligence and discipline. He even wrote what he called the 10 Commandments of a con man, rules designed to control conversation and manipulate trust. Be a patient listener, never appear bored, agree with political opinions, let the other person talk about themselves. Every rule was built around understanding human behavior. Yet despite his brilliance, the life of a con artist was always unstable. By the early 1930s, Lustig became involved in one of the most dangerous criminal activities in America: large-scale counterfeiting. Working with skilled printers, he helped produce thousands of fake US dollars that circulated through the economy during the difficult years of the Great Depression. For a time, the operation was incredibly successful, but counterfeiting drew the attention of powerful investigators. The United States Secret Service, the federal agency responsible for protecting the nation's currency, began tracking the network behind the fake bills. In 1935, Victor Lustig was finally arrested. The man who had once convinced businessmen he could sell them the Eiffel Tower now faced the full force of American law. After trial and conviction, he was sentenced to a long prison term and transferred to the notorious Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, the island prison in San Francisco, known for holding some of the most dangerous criminals in the country. Behind its cold walls and iron bars, the master of deception could no longer rely on charm or disguise. Victor Lustig spent the remaining years of his life there, dying in 1947. Yet his legend did not fade. Historians and criminologists still study the extraordinary confidence schemes he created, especially the moment in 1925 when a single man looked at one of the world's most famous landmarks and imagined something no one else could. Not a monument, not a national symbol, but a product, a thing that could be sold. Today, the Eiffel Tower still rises above Paris, visited by millions every Y. Tourists photograph its iron lattice without realizing that for a brief moment in history, one of the greatest con artists who ever lived, convinced someone that the tower belonged to them. Victor Lustig never built monuments, but through sheer audacity, intelligence and understanding of human psychology, he created a story that would become one of the most unbelievable scams ever recorded. The day a man tried to sell the Eiffel Tower and succeeded.